Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, teacher in Los Angeles, trying to bridge divides and get understanding through critical thinking. My guest today is someone that I've talked to, probably did Instagram lives or something like that, but I've talked to just in personal life as well. She is an educator, a digital content creator, and a world traveler. Her name is Brittney Caldwell. We're going to talk about a couple of things. We're talk about education, and then I want to talk about a little bit of what she learned from her travels, particularly in Africa, and about the differences, I guess, that she has seen being a Black American and then going to Africa and experience like African culture and stuff like that. So we have a lot to touch on. I'm really excited to talk to you, and I've learned a lot just from you and your perspectives on things. And we've had a lot of really cool like private conversations. So I just thought it was kind of long overdue to bring you on the podcast and talk to you. So it's nice to see you.
It's been a while. I'm loving it already. It's really good to see you.
Yeah.
I've seen your platform is like just going.
Yeah, it's sometimes it has like a mind of its own, you know, like I'll post something and I look at the comment section. It's like, oh my gosh, this is not what I want. But the internet, like I was saying before we were recording, like I might say something that's not very PC or something. You're like, oh, what's a safe space? And it's like, well, yeah, for you, but like the internet has a way of just like picking up on things, taking things out of context. And I think because you and I have exchanged enough conversation that we kind of know where each other stand as far as like where our hearts are and stuff like that. That's what you don't get with the internet. That's what you don't get is you kind of get just a little snippet and then people run off and make all kinds of assumptions about people and stuff.
All engagement is good engagement.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So we connected just because of social media, because we were both kind of like Instagram teachers. And it's actually not that big of a space of people who bring like what they're doing in their classroom and the teacher life to Instagram. So I've tried to connect with a lot of teachers who bring elements of their classroom and their teaching practices on Instagram, you know, with varying degrees of success in forming relationships with them. But that's how you and I connected. And then during COVID, I remember talking to you and you were like, you know, this is really hard remote teaching. And I was like, oh, it's really hard for me remote teaching and stuff like that. And we taught in very different situations.
Yeah.
I was at a religious private school and you were at a more like inner city, I guess, like predominantly Black school in Atlanta. And we blended our classes together and put them into Zoom breakout rooms. And it was awesome. It was really cool.
That is one of my favorite teaching experiences in my portfolio, I can say. And I use it as like an example on interviews of like diverse ways of thinking and making connections, real life. And like they're like, wow. And I'm like,
Yeah, it was such an opportunity that I think was missed by a lot of people. So can you just go over like kind of your side of it? I probably talked about it too, but like what your kind of take on what we did and how it kind of unfolded from your side?
I think that, well, we both were teaching like US history, I believe, at the time. And we just kind of like put our kids into groups and it was like awkward at first. I remember they were like, crickets. And then, you know, as time went on, they started getting more comfortable. And then we're like, oh my God, like we're ending it, you know? So it's just, I think, I can't remember exactly how we executed it, but we gave them like questions to discuss with one another. And they were related to US history. And of course, that's when that like diverse thought comes in, like different demographics, different groups of people, or more alike thinking than you would think based off of your differences that they had with one another. But a lot of thoughts were actually more aligned than we would even think. And it was just like a really good experience. I would say the educational aspect of it, I did not really like even value as much as the connection part.
Absolutely.
And it was meaningful to me because a lot of my kids, being at a very homogeneous type of school where they're all African-American, Title I, a lot of them don't even have friends like outside of their race or come into contact with that many people where they're having like long conversations outside of their race unless they're very intentional about it. So it was just like something really cool to provide to them.
Yeah. I remember like we broke them all out just like randomly into rooms where it was like at least 2 kids from your class and 2 kids from my class. So it was like kind of balanced. And then you and I were just in like the remaining room together, just like, all right, I wonder what's going on. And we like poked our head in from time to time. And
Yeah.
it was like a little awkward at first, but then they got into it. And what was so cool is they're teenagers. So they were just like talking about all kinds of stuff, like really openly, like there were no issues at all about like any kind of contentious stuff. They were all kind of timid, but like willing to go out. Then they started talking about like, even like stereotypes and things like that, because I was concerned about, I'm at this modern Orthodox Jewish private school, like near Beverly Hills, which is it's a whole different world. And they're in a bubble. And a lot of them never had a conversation with kids outside of like their bubble. And especially like a lot of them had never had a conversation with a Black kid before, or a Black person, like really, except for like maybe just someone they meet, at like a restaurant or something like that, like someone working or whatever it might be, an Uber driver or something. So to put them on even playing field in an even situation. And I remember saying to you, like, I think this is the first time a lot of my kids have ever like actually just talked to like a Black peer. And you were like, you said something like, not only is this the first time that a lot of my students have ever talked to a Jewish person, but maybe someone like had a conversation with like a white kid.
Yeah, seriously. No,
Yeah.
I had multiple kids tell me like, that's the longest I've ever talked to a white person.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. Otherwise a doctor. Yeah. And they're like, yeah.
Right. Yeah. But like we're their peers.
Yeah.
Like they're not tutoring them, or you're not having them tell you what to do or something like that. They're not working for you, whatever it might be. And it was so cool. And then when the time was up, they're like, oh, we didn't exchange Snapchats or whatever. And they wanted to do it again. But then we started going to more of like the hybrid models, and it never happened again, which I think was probably a missed opportunity. But that, I think so fondly back to that. And I think it was something that we could have done more. Like we as a country could have done more. And I think about, that's also the way that I look at social media, is a way to just connect with people more and get to know them on even grounds. It was really cool.
I totally agree. And that's why I love social media. So when I honestly think of the time period when me and you met, like when I was on the teachergram vibe, it actually is so cringe to me. It's one of the worst like memories, my teachergram, because it's just so like, I feel like monolithic for success in that arena. Mm-hmm. And that was like what I wanted so badly. And now when I look at like my brand, it's totally different. And like the things that actually like got me the engagement and like the platform voice wise that I really wanted, I was not made for teachergram. And it got me like in a lot of trouble almost when you have teachergram going on. So it's like, I look back at that and I'm like, oh, but I did get good things out of teachergram, such as like meeting you, like hashtags, like the power of the hashtag. The power of like really speaking back to people when they're speaking to you, that's how you build those connections. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, social media, making it social, making it a place where you can have these kinds of connections. Yeah, I'm with you, but I'm with you also where like, I don't feel like I fit in with a lot of teachergram is like Pinteresty. It's like, look at this cork board that I did and stuff like that. And that's not, I'm more interested in like really challenging thought and getting to like the root of how do we get these kids to go out and find success and find meaningful lives and stuff like that. And it's obviously
really good for people who are doing like digital resources, which I think you would really do really well at. And like, I would love to see, when I see the questions that you pose online, I would love to be like a fly on the wall in your classroom as far as like how that instruction goes. Like, I know you're really into like deeper thinking and like conversations. Like I would love as a teacher to like see how that goes. I feel like you would have a really different type of digital resource to offer people if you get into that. But
I think I'm moving in that direction actually. So I'll pick your brain about that because you left education, and can you bring it? So I kind of was watching, just communicating a little bit, just kind of watching through social media channels and stuff like that. You decided to leave. You're from DC, right?
Yes.
From DC, lived down in Atlanta when you were teaching, and then you went to Africa.
Yeah, I got a job at an international school, and I thought that was like the creme de la creme, like screw public schools, man. I'm out of here, deuces. Like you're paying for this, nightmare. So it was like a embassy school. I was teaching IB for the first time. I was AP, and I switched to IB history, which is like completely different than AP history. And I ended up getting fired from that job due to like, long story short, like my social media presence and me having a voice on social media. So they fired me on a technicality, but the underlying part was I had like a lot of parental disapproval on my like voice and actions on social media. And like I don't know if you get like the oh, well, you posted a podcast, but you haven't graded my essay, like type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So is that kind of stuff like, oh, your priority is social media, not your students, that kind of like assumption.
Yeah. So I was like, you know what? I am not even going to look for another educator job at this point. I'm so drained.
Yeah.
I was just drained of like this halo that people want educators to wear, this very monolithic, I eat, breathe, and sleep teaching all day, every day. We're not really like encouraged to have opinions. Everything is taken like extremely sensitively.
Yeah.
And I was just drained. So I was like, you know what? I'm done teaching in the classroom. So I've been navigating my way through still being an educator without being in the classroom.
Interesting. Yeah. Like, I mean, are they okay with teachers like playing golf on the weekends? Like what, like, this is so wild that we're just expected to drop everything. Like it's a job. I mean, it's a great job. I love the job. I do, but it's a job. And everyone who has a job, it's essentially a 9-to-5 job. And then those other hours, you can do whatever the hell you want. This is crazy, but I understand that. I understand that element. I actually had something, my wife posted a picture of us. We went to Las Vegas for her birthday and she had a picture of us like making out or something. And people were like, that's inappropriate for you as a teacher to show. It's like, it's my wife. Like, what do you mean? I can't kiss my wife?
I had a student like report me for smoking hookah on my Insta. And I'm like, I am a legal adult.
Right.
Like, it's no other job.
Yeah.
And there, you're a role model. Everyone should be a role model. Everyone, no matter, a trash guy should be a role model. I mean, that's just a part of society. Being a good person in society, you should aim to be a role model. So I'm just like over it. I don't want to be anyone's role model because I'm a teacher. Like, so I had to free myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I get accusations like that, and I'm just like, I just fire back of like, what's the problem here? Like, if we're trying to guide these young people, perhaps recognizing that we're not perfect, that we are flawed people, that sometimes we go to Vegas and we make out with our wives, sometimes we smoke stuff from here and there that's legal and blah 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 blah. Like, what? Like, really? Like, we're human, and I think when kids recognize that like their teachers are human, maybe that's a positive. To see them that we make mistakes and we do positive things and negative things, and just bringing that human element, trying to delete that from like the reality for teachers, it just doesn't seem like a winning strategy.
Yeah, no, it's behind. It'll catch up one day. Now they are kind of having no choice because no one wants to teach. So they're learning the hard way. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, people are leaving the profession, and you left the profession, which I understand why people do. But so what are you doing now? And then I want to get into to what is your experience? I guess maybe you can blend these two together. Like, what was your experience when you first went to Africa? Because you hadn't been there before, right?
So I was doing work in Ghana during COVID. I was going back and forth. I was in Ghana looking for a job in Ghana and could not get placed in Ghana and ended up getting placed in Kenya. So it was, I've really truly learned a lot about myself during this transition of me spending time there. So when I was first in Ghana, I was doing like what I actually hate now, which is like oh my God, they need books, they need this, let's send this. Like, I thought I was like helping, and I did help, but it almost cast like a negative light, or like it goes into that whole like poor Africa mindset.
Yes.
And like, even though I had good intentions, now that I can sit back and reflect on the situation, it's like not really helping the stereotypes that are out there.
Yeah.
So I was doing that whole thing. It did help. I did help build the schools. Kelly Clarkson like recognized me on her show for my efforts and things. But like, I just started realizing when I went to Kenya, like a lot of these people don't need help. There's many people over here who could help if they wanted to, and they're not for a reason. The same as in the United States. Like, it's not like they just don't have any ability to mobilize and get help for these things. It comes down to like government corruptions. Like, their governments have money, There's other underlying things. So like, I have kind of been now more transitioning my platform as far as like showcasing Africa to like dispelling those beliefs that I even was playing into almost,
Yeah.
or like showing like the resources that they have, the wealth that they have. It looks amazing over here. It looks like America. Like, so that's kind of where I transitioned. I was able to kind of spend, after I got fired, I just ended up hanging out in Kenya. I was like, I'm already over here. I'm not going to go home. I'm going to ride the school year out. I didn't plan on going home anyway. So I just spent some time and realized like how badly my thoughts really were as an American living in Africa before I was able to like really deep dive into the culture, like leave the expat world, like really get a view of what's real.
Yeah.
So now I kind of like even just have different opinions totally on things.
Africa is a fascinating place because people think like Africa, it's like a thing. It's like a country. Like, no, it's a continent and it's huge. It's huge. I heard someone say something that like we lump like Africans or like African American, or Africans as like one thing, but they were talking about diversity. Like some of the poorest areas in the world are in Africa and some of the wealthiest. And then it's even biological diversity. They said people in Africa, the shortest people and the tallest people. So like biological differences of if you're African, then you are this thing is so absurd because there's so much diversity, even among African people, African societies, like extreme corruption, the extreme modern cities. It's crazy diverse. And I think that most Americans don't understand that. And you were confronted with that in real time. You're like, oh, this is not what I was told.
At all. And like I said, I thought that I like knew it all because I had spent time in Ghana. Kenya was completely different from Ghana, which was actually completely different from when I went to Nigeria, which was different from when I went to Tanzania, which is right next to Kenya. Every country is so different. Like you just said, every tribe, there's so many tribes within even one country. So it's just such a huge, diverse place that I got ate up on TikTok and Instagram for being like Brittney in Africa. And they're like, Africa's not a country. And I'm like, okay, I'm saying this, you guys, because I'm mobilizing, I'm moving. The goal is to visit every country eventually. But just even thoughts like that, like it is huge. And you're totally right. Like it's the poorest and it's the nicest at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, you traveled it too. I mean, I think at one point you were like, documenting, like you went from like the east coast of Africa to the west coast or something like that, like traveling all different methods of travel. You were traveling on like scooters and buses and like everything, right?
I love a boda. I do. Yeah. I really truly enjoyed myself. My mom, I've made sure that my mom comes to visit me every single country. And when she got to Nairobi, she was like, this is like nicer than Tampa. And I'm like, welcome, sis. Like, wow. Their Apple Pay is like what we would compare to like Apple Pay, their M-Pesa, it's called, is like light years ahead of anything that's here. Like it's almost linked to their social security numbers. So everyone has one, even if you're like a homeless man, like an M-Pesa where you can do e-money, like it's very advanced. And it's just things that we're not taught. It's things that I would never have known to even teach my kids. It's crazy. The media, it all comes down to the media, but that's a dark oath.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this issue is surprisingly, when I look at like my Instagram as it grows and like who my audience is and stuff like that, a lot of African immigrant or emigrant, I guess, because it's like even people in the UK and stuff, women follow my account. And it was like, what is this about? Like a lot of women from different, from the place you're mentioning, Zimbabwe, Ghana, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Mali, places like that. And I'm like, what is this? What's going on? And my content and how it can ruffle feathers and stuff like that. I get called like isms and stuff like the ist or whatever and stuff like that. But why do you think that might be? And you can't, I mean, obviously you don't know, but like, why do you think it might be that there's like a decent group of, especially women from Africa, that seem to resonate with the stuff that I'm doing, especially when I talk about like the third rail issues of like social justice and stuff like that?
So from my experience, a lot of places that I've been to over there, they do not fall into this like, woe is me, African-American, sad sob story. We've been oppressed and we can't, they like hate that. And they really come over here. They work hard. They believe the dream is achievable for everyone. they come and open businesses. So there is like a lot of interactions that have been negative stereotypes towards African Americans from that side, because they just look at it as like, y'all are using excuses, or race, you're kind of playing on that too much. I actually got accused of this in Kenya by Black. So I had a bad interaction at my job, because I said to one of my coworkers, like, this sounds so awful, but I was trying to be like funny with her, basically, like my Black ass, or like my son's Black ass. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just not a big deal here. And she's like really offended. And she's like, it was crazy to me. It's just the ways of knowing. So they don't refer to like Blackness. The way that I'm ingrained in America is just, I'm Black, everything's Black, Black power, Black lives matter, blah, 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 blah. They do not like resonate in everything being racially based as much as us. So like the way that I'm so conditioned to, even when I'm filling out a job application, I'm Black, it asks, they don't have that, So it's like this emphasis on race that I've kind of internalized. So it's just normal, and a really big part of my identity is not a part of their identity. It's not something that it can almost be seen as like offensive. Like me calling her Black, she was genuinely like offended and like looked at it as a negative. So like, it wasn't even me saying ass. It was like me saying Black. Because I said like Black ass Kenyans or whatever. And I'm dark. It just wasn't, they don't have this like emphasis on Blackness that I do. So they were just like, a lot of people I interacted with were like, you're just like, so everything's about race. And I'm like, no, I'm not even making it a negative thing. It's just like, they wouldn't get it until they lived here, that we've just been kind of like ingrained to make a lot of things about race. But what does that look like in a country where everyone's Black? Right.
Yeah, because like the norm here is not, I mean, it's where, Black people are 13% of the population or something like that, where I'm throwing out numbers, maybe like 60% are white or something like that. Right. Like so so it's like, if it's not like the norm, then it's kind of seen as like, okay, well then it has to be one of my identity markers. But if everyone looks the same, then you kind of almost have to identify according to things other than skin color. Something along those lines.
Tribes come in.
Yeah.
Elitism is a big thing. Classism, elitism, tribalism. That's where all that comes in, because the Blackness is not a factor.
Yeah. So we'll still group each other, and we'll still hate the other, and we'll still be terrible to the other, but just not as much on skin color, beyond other terrible things.
Which has taught me, though, genuinely, that it is human nature to oppress.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not racism, it's something else.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, America has a tricky history with this. I mean, everyone has tricky, like we talk about like slavery or something, taught U.S. history, like the triangular trade, slave trade, I mean, it did, come in Africa. So people were enslaving their own people to sell to the traders and stuff like that. It's a really complicated, messy thing, but it's easier to label someone the other when it's so clearly in appearance. Like the Irish were treated terribly, but they could kind of like pass, anti-Semitism is a thing, but you can kind of pass, where it's, I don't think like you would be like, oh, I'm Irish. Like, it's not going to fly. So it's it's almost like easier to other people because of their skin color, because of their eye shape or whatever it is. That's like an easier way to do it. So I think that's probably why it happens when in a racially diverse population.
Exactly. But when you do have like a country full of, like I said, Black people, it's completely different. Another shocker to me was there's like this almost obsession. It is not really shocking, but everyone wants to leave. A lot of them want to leave. There's such low employment. There's high unemployment, and a lot of them are super, super educated. Like, the school systems are better with less resources, in my opinion. They're more advanced with less resources, more disciplined. The students have higher like expectations as far as behavior standards and things like that we don't really, have the luxury of not having to deal with over here. But a lot of them want to just come here and work. Like the things that we kind of complain about. And they're like, you're complaining about hours. Like you're complaining about this minimum wage, which is like way more. I just left Nigeria, and you can work 40 hours a week and literally make like $100 a month. And you think in your mind, like, oh, it's the currency is equating. It's not equating. It's still like literal, like, I don't even know. It's awful. Seriously. There's a lack of jobs. There's been situations where I've heard of people who have to bribe to get a job, like tell them you'll give them your first couple paychecks if they hire you. People just want to work so badly. Yeah. So I think that like, even with my fiance, like there's stereotypes of African-Americans. So his family's like, you know, are you aggressive? Like, are you going to cuss him out? Like, do you have family in the
He's
gang?
from Africa, right?
Yeah,
you're marrying an African man.
He is Nigerian. I met him in Kenya, but yeah, like, do you have family in gangs? Like, I swear, because they just like this. The door revolves both ways. So we're looking at them. Some of us look at them like, oh, like, do you live in a jungle? Do you live in a, and they're looking at us like, am I going to get shot walking to your house? Like,
that gets me to something. This is like, you know, and this is like kind of tricky to say, but whatever, I'll say it best I can, is like, there is an element where there are stereotypes. I think there are stereotypes among all people. I mean, among Black people, but let's just say white people in America about African-American people, about Black people. So if you're in a restaurant and two, you know, young Black men walk in and you get apprehensive because of, you know, crime or something like that, some sort of racial stereotype. And then when they speak, they have an African accent. There's a change that happens in that person who's prejudging that individual compared to if they have like a Brooklyn accent or something like that. And it's almost like, oh, that's something different. It's like a weird judgment that happens when they go, oh, this person, because they are not African-American, they are an immigrant from another country, because it aligns with a whole bunch of other things, because of the education system, because of the difference in culture and all that kind of stuff. That's a really tricky thing to like talk about, especially me as like a white dude to like talk about that. But can you bring me into like how
I've gone in on this on my YouTube? We are our own. African Americans are our own distinct tribe, and we are different than Africans, and it is what it is. Even with my fiance, we have fundamental differences that he does not get because he is not African American. I have more in common with one of my best friends is a white man, Jason. He's from Mississippi. I'm from South Carolina originally. We have more in common fundamentally than me and my Black husband. You know, like, literally just off the fact that we're Americans. So it took me, even like the solace and peace I found in finding Americans in Kenya, whether they be Black, white, or Asian, we had more alike than me in this country full of Black people. And that's where like my mind has changed. It's not like we are not just like monolithic. It's not like, oh my God, it is a welcome home, but truly African-Americans are so far off from many of the like principles of traditional African cultures. We are very different. And I hate the internet because they're going to be like, well, some people, I'm talking about grossly for the most part.
Yeah, these are generalizations, but
generalizations, but for the most part. So like, you know, I'm like, my man doesn't know what cornbread is, peach cobbler, banana pudding. He hasn't, I'm doing the cha-cha slide. We're doing the Cupid shuffle. He has no clue. He's telling me about what a traditional wedding is. Looking at me crazy because I don't have a tribe. I have to like find a tribe to attach with his tribe, because usually when you're getting introduced, the same in Kenya and Nigeria and Ghana, you have to go to the bride's house, introduce formally. There's no like, oh, I'm bringing my babe home to meet my parents, unless you're ready to get married. And that's for most, you know, traditional African households, unless you're ready to get married. You don't really do that. So he's just like, you know, so other people have like, well, do people just take your regular boyfriend from high school home? Like, I'm trying to like explain this to him because it's just like fundamental differences. During high school, I would like never really see any of my African friends like at the dances or like the games as much, or like recreational things. Like, and now I can see why, going full circle, because they don't really like that. Like, focus on this, focus on this. Like, you're not here to play around yearbook club. How is that going to get you to, there's just cultural differences. Yeah. The internet, TikTok, social media is narrowing that gap, I believe, slowly, but we are very different. So I found my expat group in Kenya of Black Americans, and it was a breath of fresh air, because sometimes you feel like a stranger amongst Black people, amongst Kenyans. I felt like a stranger in Tanzania. If my mouth is closed, I look like I belong here. But when I open my mouth, I'm treated differently. It's wild.
Yeah. And you're probably being in America for all your life. It's probably one of those things where if you were in a situation, a social situation, it's all white people, and you saw a Black girl or guy, you kind of be like, oh, like, and now you don't, and then you're in this situation that you're like, oh, wait, now I'm the other. But it's really interesting. It's why race is such I had Dr. Sheena Mason on my podcast, who has the theory of racelessness. She's really awesome. But she was talking about like kind of what you're saying about like the way we categorize people. Race is kind of a goofy one. And when you look at statistics, like all kinds of different statistics, like about like systemic racism, which I'm not denying systemic racism. I'm really not. There are elements of that are absolutely true. But there are wrenches that you can throw into this like simplistic explanation, like Nigerian immigrants outperform their white counterparts in America. So it has to be, that's not to say, Ian Rowe on my podcast, who's a, brilliant thinker and stuff. And he said that he was bringing something up about his viewpoints. He's a little bit more conservative, but he's from Jamaican heritage. And he was told like, oh, well, you don't really know the Black experience because you're Jamaican. He's like, wait a second. Like, if I'm walking down the street and a cop's harassing me, they're not like, oh, wait, you're Jamaican. Never mind. Continue. I'm not going to harass you. Yeah. Like, it's really tricky, but that does throw, as I said, a wrench into this narrative that it's only based on skin color. I don't know how to kind of reconcile all of that, but I think it's something that's worth talking to. And it's not because I'm worried about stepping on a landmine talking about this stuff. I'm not even sure how to kind of make sense of it. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I get what you're saying. So one thing that I also found interesting, I want to throw in, a lot of people I have met abroad, like say you're African, clearly to my eyes, but you're living in France, you grew up in France. They're like, I'm French. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you're like, but where are you from? Like you're Black, like it's not like I'm African French, like I'm Afro French or I'm Black French. They're like, I'm French, like I'm French. I do not feel I don't say I'm American. Like, I don't know. So I'm just like, why do I have to be Black American, African American? Like, but many people are like, I'm from Britain, like I'm British, I'm blah, 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 in these other places. So like I had come into interaction at the international school I was teaching with Black people like myself, skin wise, who grew up in Europe with less emphasis on race, or like, just like, not really like that. We still didn't have that connection. Yeah. Really. I don't know. It was just weird. I don't even know how to actualize what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing, because I think I've been conditioned. I think every American has been conditioned, and I don't think that this has gotten better. Unfortunately, I think it's gotten worse in the past couple of years, post George Floyd and stuff like that, of like understanding race in America and stuff. It's been kind of polluted of like a bunch of bad actors on both sides of that aisle of that situation to try and make sense of what's going on here. But there are clearly problems when it comes to inequities according to race in America. And there's also things that are being pumped up as true that aren't. And I worry about, you're an educator too. Like, kids live up or down to expectations. So if the expectation is you belong to this category, so you are not expected to do well. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on with like abandoning standardized tests and stuff because they're systemically racist, like assuming that kids, because of their skin color, are not able to achieve. And that's not my experience in the classroom, having taught a bunch of different kids from different, diverse races. I'm sure it's not yours either. Brilliance comes in all shades and shapes and sizes. So it's a really messy kind of situation that we're in. Do you think that going to Africa would be a beneficial thing for Black Americans?
No.
Why?
Yes and no. It depends on why you're going. It depends on if you have a job, what you're going to do. Because I've seen a lot of people go out there and like honestly adapt that same like better than youism, or they kind of like create an elitist
because they're American
for themselves, taking the dollar to somewhere, or like things that you wouldn't do or have here that you maybe couldn't afford when you go over there. So I had an awkward situation because I had a friend like mistreating a Kenyan, underpaying her, like things that you would complain about at home traditionally as an African-American that you're now placing on a Kenyan because you hold the power card. Yeah. So that was an awkward conversation. So I think it just is like, depends on what you are going over there to do.
That's interesting. That's so American too. It's like, you should be speaking my language. Why are they speaking that other language? In France, they're speaking French. Yeah, well, they should be speaking American. It's like
so typical.
Yeah.
I had to catch myself too, though, because like I have realized that I have a lot of inherently racist that could be categorized as racist thoughts. Like I at first was like in some of my earlier YouTube videos, because now that I'm like in the regular job market, I had to go through and like comb through my YouTube videos, see what's offensive, like see, you know how it is.
Yeah.
So I'm like, So I'm like going through, and I was like, I said something like, when I see like too many white people here, I'm just wondering like, what are they doing here? Like, why are you here? Like, or like, I was like, I see a lot of white men on the beach with like really underage looking girls. And I'm just wondering, like, did you adopt them? Like, is this sexual? Like these little, like, I'm like, the Chinese people are building too much over here. There's too many Indians here, but like, just things like that where I'm like,
I'm gonna cut that all out in a clip and post it.
I swear though, it's like, I had to catch myself. Now I'm maturing, I'm in my 30s, but some of the things and thoughts that I've thought are hurtful.
Why did you think them?
Because I just had an idea of what Africa was supposed to look like, and it was supposed to be full of only Africans. So like when you go and like a lot of the population is Indian, I had to get my head wrapped around Indians being a tribe in Kenya. Because I'm like, you're not Black. Yeah. How are you a tribe? They're a recognized legal tribe. There's like a group of Indians because they've been there from the longest, like the same way African Americans have been here and we migrated. They've been in Kenya for a very long time, to the point where they are a recognized tribe. And at first I was really like disgusted by this and like just looked at them like, as non-Africans in Africa, but maturity and experiences has made me realize like, I'm placing a monolithic view on what Africa is, can be, and will be, should be, has been, and like projecting almost racism.
Yeah. Well, when you said
some people can say that in America.
Yeah.
Like, you're not American, you're Black.
Right. The power inverse is so interesting. I think there are elements of like, whatever you want to call it, like woke culture or whatever, like critical social justice, the people, or it's like, they are games of power. So you could take a very marginalized person from a marginalized group. So I think like trans is like a big issue, obviously. So like, this is a group that's been marginalized and oppressed in very real ways and crushed by society, very real ways for a very long time. So now it's like, how do we inverse that? It's like an Ibram Kendi kind of idea. So you kind of like inverse the discrimination. The only way to correct past discrimination is with current discrimination, that kind of idea. And I think it's a natural thing, is like, if you feel like you never had like that kind of societal power, whether or not you did, just if that's your perception, you go to a place and you might go like, all right, I kind of like this jacket of like having a little bit of power over people. It's something you really got to be careful of, because that's something that I see. And I think that's part of one of the things that I call out of like the social justice kind of lot, is not because I don't believe in social justice, but I worry that all of us are susceptible to that. All of us are susceptible of like, I never felt like I was powerful. It's like, no girls liked me when I was young, but then I had a glow up and all of a sudden I'm good looking and now I'm going to be terrible to girls. Like, I think that's just a natural thing that we all do. And I think the best way to combat that is to be aware of it. Like, I have that in me too, that I could act in the ways that hurt me from a societal level or an individual level. So when I get in those situations, I want to make sure I don't do that. And I don't think that a lot of people who are playing these like whatever woke games are aware that they could become acting in the very ways that kind of hurt them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. I don't know if you've heard of like the Talented 10 and like even the elitism that grew from Black fraternities and sororities. So beginning Black fraternities and sororities, I just did like a whole reading on this, and they were there was like a high class group of African Americans who lived in LA at the beginning of like the growth of LA, and they had a meeting like panicking because more Black people were moving to LA who had less money. And they were like, they're going to make us look bad. Yeah. People are going to stop wanting us to be here. And they like automatically like just drew out the shark claws on these people, saying like the most derogatory things about them. And I'm reading this as a primary resource for research. And these are African Americans who had just like worked their way up, were able to afford to go to like Howard and the Hampton, and like, they were the talented 10th percent of the population and light enough to pass. And like, people weren't really tripping about them being LA at that moment. So they were like in a frenzy because they don't want like the dirty ones to come.
Oh, yeah. So
it's just like always, yeah.
And we turn on each other, and that could be along racial lines. It could be along a whole bunch of different lines. Teach a Jewish school, like Jewish people do it to Jewish people all the time. White people do it to white people. It's there always is that need to other, because we are a tribal species. And so, you're part of my tribe. I think in politics, it happens a lot. You see the Republicans, you're a rhino or you're a MAGA or whatever it is. Like they divide, and they, instead of trying to understand and expand the circle a little bit and work out our differences, you just other them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree with people coming over here and working, making a way, getting jobs, being successful in school, getting scholarships. Like we do sometimes as African Americans, we have this like victim mentality, this go-to crutch. Even at my school, I assumed that a lot of people didn't like me because I was a Black woman, when really I could just be a jerk to some people. Some people maybe just don't like me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, or it's my socials, or my opinion is not necessarily because I'm Black, but I just feel like I have been conditioned to just assume it's because I'm Black.
Well, Michelle Obama she mentioned something in an interview that she was like at a bakery and she had like a hat on and glasses and stuff with her daughters. And she said like a white man butted in front of me, and that's because I'm a Black woman. And that's what the experience, didn't know I was Michelle Obama. And that's the experience. And I tell my class, like, maybe he's just an asshole. Maybe he just butts in front of everybody. Like, you don't know. But like what you said, like I say that it's like problematic. Like if you say it, it's stupid. But something I've learned is like, just because you're a Black woman doesn't mean that you're off limits from being accused of terrible things. Like that opinion you just gave, is that like something that, you catch flack for among African Americans, among people who are in like the, teachergram or whatever it is, people who are more on that like social justice side, like saying something like we have a victim mentality because they're like, oh, what are you, Candace Owens now? Like, like that kind of weird kind of play. I don't know.
Most of my following has become like African migrants and immigrants, to be honest. Okay, so they're like, they're a part of my enlightenment. I want to bring you, when I was in Kenya, I met a white guy who is like a lower class from America, living off disability, and he moved to Kenya. White guy, lived amongst the locals while I'm like the expat there making American dollars. And he's like literally living like a local Kenyan, barely could like afford a ride to my apartment for the interview. Right. So I got really thrown off because he came into the interview and was like, the way that people look at white people here, like so privileged and all this, you're the white man, really not me. And he's like, I'm the one struggling. I can barely make it here. You're the white man. So we're like arguing in the interview. And he's like, I did my research. You grew up on a golf course, Brittney, blah, 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 like coming at me. And was like, you're the one who has white privilege over here. I don't have any privilege. Like, I can barely get over here. My wife is Kenyan and I have real local friends. He told me, he's like, you don't even know how to start a fire on a whatever because you have a stove. Like, just like pause out on me, you know? And I'm just like sitting back later, like, perspective is a thing. I could see why you would feel that way. Maybe like,
yeah, you can say that with a little more grace.
Yeah, but it did make me like, hey, I get what you're saying, kind of like, you know, life is just funny.
Yeah, it probably is a good experience for him, you know, to recognize that. I'm sure he didn't think that when he first got there, but then he's like, interesting. This is probably how, just by using the language that you shared, like, it's probably like the way that a lot of people feel. So it's just like, you know, how quickly that kind of stuff can change.
I've always thought of myself as like a really open-minded person and like really educated and knowledgeable, but actually my like intense, like ignorance in a lot of things, as far as just ways of knowing and perspective, it just takes you going and seeing, living, or like loving someone who can teach you that. I think like hearing someone, being in close proximity to someone who teaches you these things, because I've even had to like educate my family on a lot of things that I've learned. Did you
always have a desire for travel? Was that something that always interested you in being like a traveler, even you know, nationally, but now international travel?
Yes, I think it's really important. My traveling has made me realize how different Americans truly are, though, from the rest of the world. For real. I think we're just really different. Like, and I don't know if it's a good thing. I'm a proud American. I'm more proud to be American now that I've lived abroad, I can say. But that's one thing. I've always loved traveling. Yeah. And the more I travel, the more I realize that like we are all very much more alike than different, but Americans are a little different.
Yeah, I found this Mark Twain quote. Daryl Davis, who had on the podcast like 2 years ago, talked about it because he's a world traveler, grew up traveling like with his military family or something. And it's why I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's the one who befriended people in the KKK. He's a black guy. He's a musician. He befriended guys in the KKK and got them to give up their robes, give up the life. It's an incredible person. But he shared this Mark Twain quote that I have here. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. That's I think a good message for young people to like, maybe not like as narrow as I framed it for you before of like Black Americans should go to Africa, but Americans, youth should travel. We did that remotely over Zoom, but traveling is really, really important, I think, for getting us out of this weird divisive time that we're in this country, in this very diverse country of ours in America, is the importance of travel.
You have to. I mean, you truly have to. That's the only way that you become empathetic. And that's the only way that you realize that we all have way more similarities than differences, just as mankind, period.
Yeah.
Just as humans, you know? I just grow wiser every year. Every single country I visit, I become more open-minded. And I find like happiness in the differences. And it's a mirror to yourself, essentially. Yeah. Like I've learned so much about myself through the viewpoint of others and their perspective on me, you know, as someone who's not a part of this culture, I would say, or even like, just like how empty our streets are compared to a lot of other countries. Like we truly are a car nation. And like you read about that as a US history teacher in the books, like, oh, America switches to cars in the 1950s and blah, blah, blah. But like when you go to other countries and you're in these places, you truly see that there is a larger community out in the streets. Even if they do have cars and access to cars, they walk. And like what the suburbs really, like these things that like we learn in the textbook and it's like, oh, blah, 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 American life. I feel like the more that you travel, you truly see like the emphasis that it's had on like how we treat each other. You know, the individualism is a thing, you know, these type.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to close this out. I think that's just, I was really interested in like your biggest kind of lessons that you've learned from your travels, being just like a very like American person, like talking to you, you sound super American. You're like very American, and then becoming a world traveler, like all the different perspectives that you gain. And that's what, that life experience is wisdom. Then you're going to have that wisdom to pass on to students, your children, grandchildren, whatever it is because you have these experiences that you can't really fake. Like you have to go through those kind of crazy experiences of that guy yelling at you and traveling in the back of a scooter through some like backwoods area of Africa. Like those are going to be super valuable, I think, when you just understanding the world.
One thing that really bothered me that somebody said to me, a couple of people on my YouTube were like, you like abandon kids in America who need just as much like educational support and resources to go like do it in a whole nother country. Why? When there's like just as many kids in America suffering. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. It's a reflective question. I haven't really like sat down to like really truly answer it. Just like,
that's like it reminds me of like the Bible story where like Judas was upset that Jesus was getting his like feet washed with like special oils or something like that. And he's like, there's always going to be poor. He's like, we could give that money to the poor. It's like, there's always going to be poor. Yeah, there are kids in America that are needed and I could help them. But I got that when I left from public school to my private school. It's like, these kids, they're wealthy. They don't need the help. They'll be fine. Like, no, they struggle too. They struggle because of crazy pressure to get into Princeton. And they struggle because their dads are never around. And like, they struggle in a million different ways, anxiety and depression and all that kind of stuff too. Like whoever's, casting those judgments at you, it's like, what are you doing to contribute to kids? Like, there are people that need help everywhere. And you, Brittney, being the best version of yourself is one of the ways that you're going to be able to serve people throughout your life. And perhaps traveling and getting these kinds of experiences so you can have this kind of wisdom that a lot of other teachers don't have would be a way to do it. So it's so easy for someone to cast aspersions at you and judge you and critique you in your decisions. But that's, again, really overly simplistic. I'm trying to understand that.
So I'm really excited for my next chapter though. So I do want to I hope we can circle back. I am sponsoring my husband to come here.
Okay.
So he's like, not even really pressed to be here. He lives a great life in Nigeria and he thinks it's so sad that we have to work 9 to 5 and like asked to take off all these days. Like, he's like, for you guys. But I'm like encouraging him to come here. So we're going through like the visa process and like hopefully we'll get like naturalization for him. And like I'm really excited to like witness him see America for like the first time and just like his viewpoint of how things are going to be. So I hope that'll be the next time we can like do this again.
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Maybe we can bring him on. And I'd love to pick his brain about like, what have you noticed about difference in cultures, and especially because I touch on the race issue a lot. So I love adding some complexities to it because he might say stuff that I'll be like, whoa, bro, that's racist. You know what I mean?
One question before we go, what country in Africa would you like to visit the most? Or have you thought about traveling?
I have. We have a good friend that runs a charity in Uganda. So I might end up going there, and it's like, they're like employing like a bunch of women with like skills, like how to like, I don't know, do like nails and hair and stuff. Cause it's like a beauty industry. My wife's in the beauty industry. So, might want to go there. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of basic, man. I want to go on like an African safari and stuff like that too.
Uganda is beautiful. It's the Pearl of Africa. They're literally coined as like the friendliest people in Africa.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's what I need. Cause I'm out of my element. I haven't traveled much around the world. Like talking about that, I'm a hypocrite because I haven't traveled much. And that's something that it's really important for me raising my boys that they go out and they travel a lot.
I love it. Well, I love everything you're doing. I do watch, I do like, I click, share, keep going, keep voicing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you've been really supportive. I mean, even when stuff with like people were trying to cancel me over my crazy conversation stuff, you had my back, and that meant a lot because we didn't know each other that well. And I thank you for that. Where can people find you? Yeah, I guess YouTube is probably predominantly like your channel, YouTube, Instagram, stuff like that. Can you just like throw some plugs out so people can kind of follow your journey? Because it's an interesting journey, and I've enjoyed watching your process going from just like whatever, just like I'm a classroom teacher to like I am doing all this really rad stuff halfway around the world, having all kinds of fun, meeting all kinds of people. And I was living so vicariously, like, wow, that is neat stuff. So yeah, your YouTube channel, all that stuff is really, really cool. Can you just like throw some plugs out there?
Brittney in Africa on Instagram and TikTok. Brittney Caldwell on YouTube. And yeah, I'm really trying to get into TikTok. You need to get into TikTok.
That's what my wife says.
I know, but that's where it is right now, for real. Like I'm even kind of falling back from YouTube and trying to get into TikTok because that's where everybody is, honestly.
Yeah. And it's Brittney N-E-Y, not A-N-Y.
Yeah, T-T-N-E-Y.
Yeah.
Thank you guys
Brittney
so much. Africa. Like and follow. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'll cut that together. Yeah, definitely follow her whole journey. It's really rad. And at your heart, you're still an educator. So the way that you present things is in a way that's easy to follow, easy to understand. That's where I think you and I are similar, is like, let's just break this down to something that's entertaining. Cause you got to some degree, get up there and like perform for your students. And you bring that kind of energy, which I think is really, really important when you're running like a social media content and stuff like that.
Yeah. And there's a difference between a teacher and an educator. And I feel like if it's in you, it's in you, like I can teach a bird how to fly. Like, it's in you,
I hear you. Absolutely. Yeah. Brittney Caldwell, thank you so much for coming on here. Really appreciate you and look forward to doing it again.
Thank you for having me.